if you go in a debate with someone and you start questioning inequality, they'll be confused. They'll be like, "Why? What do you mean? Why do I now need to prove this self-evident thing? Um, self-evident thing that in this debate? Why is it not? Why is it important? But why it? How did it come about? What is a little bit of what is the genealogy of it? I don't know how to spell genealogy. I'm not sure. But basically, the idea is that everyone is equal to one. That how we got here is either from Christianity, that everyone should be equal. We could have gotten from utilitarianism to some degree, that everyone should be equal. It's not exactly 100% clear. Certainly, from an objectivist point of view, we want everyone to be equal under the eyes of the law. But I think more and more nowadays, people want everyone to be equal in legislation as well. So if someone is not equal, then then there'll be an expectation to legislate it in a way that they then become equal, or inequality is reduced. But even we're interested in some sort of equality, and people just take it further than we do. So this idea of equal to one is an important thing to think about. Moving on, we have the concept of desert or deserving. Do we deserve what we have? Do we deserve what we have? We have inequality. Do the people that have more deserve what they have? Do the people who have less deserve what they have? Obviously, to some degree, the people who have more, they may have got it through luck. They may have gotten it from the benefits society gives them. So, they use the same roads. They were educated with teachers that were paid for by the state. Therefore, they didn't build it. The famous you didn't build it. And if you didn't build it, then you don't have any claim to it. You can't. You are part of society, and there are many factors that got you to the particular point in time, and you can't say that you're the only person that did it. So if you don't have a claim to it, then you have to give it up to other people less fortunate than you. And in another sense, the people who are less fortunate, is it their fault? Do they have more responsibility for arriving to where they are currently? And typically the answer is no. So they do not have more responsibility. And to some degree, we are talking about the concept of free will now. Now, the way I see it, free will does and does not need to come up in this sort of debate. The people who, if you bring up will in this sort of debate, then the people you're debating with may not understand why you did that. It may seem too far away from the topic. There is definitely a point where people who are less fortunate, that there's some sort of environmental or racial determinism that got them to where they are. So they don't have the agency, or they don't have enough free will to change their circumstances. So to some degree, they don't have free will enough to change, to affect their environment, or the environment is what determined where they got there. But the element of free will is that they don't have enough. And similarly to people who had a lot of who did well, there is also an element of lack of will. Not that they did not have free will to get to where they were, but we need to remove free will. It's a bit. Maybe I'll explain it a bit later on. But we need to remove free will a little to have like a sort of paternalistic society where we have the education that got the person so they could build what they build, the roads, the healthcare. We need a sort of paternalistic society that reduces our free will, but everyone is better off together. So there is an element of free will, but if you mention it, it won't sink in very well. Moving on. So to some degree, we have the fixed pie fallacy here. Now, again, this is another one of those things that if you bring up, let's say the economy is not a fixed pie, it's ever growing, they won't understand what it is that you mean. Why? Because if you, no matter how you look at it, in every given financial year, if you put all the people together in an Excel sheet, how much they earned, and have like a distribution, you will always have a distribution from where the poor have more money and the rich have where the rich have more money and the poor have less money. So to some degree, that seems fixed. And even though the economy is not a fixed pie, the inequality itself is fixed, and that does appear to mean that the economy is fixed. And if the economy is fixed, a fixed pie, then it's a zero-sum game. If someone is richer, that means someone else is poorer. Do you see what I kind of did there quickly? I mean, it's not that it's exactly accurate, but it appears that it is a fixed pie, therefore a zero-sum game, and therefore if someone is rich, someone else is poor, and we need to equal that out. Or so it's either unfair because it's a zero-sum, or it's I'm not explaining this. I haven't explained this well enough at this point, but let me just say it anyway. We built the pie together. So from a society point of view, we paid for the teachers, we paid for the roads, we paid for the infrastructure, the healthcare that got you where you are. We built the pie together, so why is it fair that you have a bigger slice than everyone else? Okay, now moving on from this point. So let's look at the data. Actually. So the data is actually considerable. There are lots and lots of studies saying that income inequality, specifically income inequality, is bad. From OECD studies, UN studies, World Economic Forum studies, IMF studies, everyone says that if you basically, and I've looked at this data, if you take all the countries in the world, even across time, and you smoosh them all together, and then you look for patterns in it, you will see that income inequality means lower economic growth, worse standard of living, worse average lifespan. All these sorts of things go around income inequality. Again, if you smush all the countries together, you will get this result. And so basically, it seems that income inequality, even from a studies point of view, is super problematic, and everyone needs to address it. The assumption is that if you have high income inequality, at least the way I understand it, is that you have more corruption in the government. Like the reason why you have money going to some people and not to generally more or less everyone else is because of political or corruption in the country. Either because some people are selfish and want more money for themselves, or in the fact that power itself corrupts, and as a result you have more corruption. And to some degree, I didn't write that. And to some degree, it kind of means that your democracy is failing. Your government is failing. So income inequality means that the government isn't doing its job, the people should replace them. Or it could be the case that it's a totalitarian country anyway, and they're not surprised. But that's like one of the implications. The other implication is crime, but this is let's say unrest for a second, because crime is a big topic. Unrest. So let's say if you have high income inequality, then you have unrest in the country. So it's also the case. Well, some studies show that income inequality is to do with crime, higher degrees of crime. Assumption is that poorer people see rich people while they themselves have nothing, so they commit more crime. I also mentioned already that you have less economic growth. Less economic growth. You might get, so with regards to unrest, you might have a revolution. So the site that, things like the French Revolution and a variety of other revolutions happened as a result of income inequality. So if you're in government, again, it's in your best interest to reduce income inequality if you want to stay in government or not be affected by a revolution. And I think this is a huge concern, the rise of fascism. So particularly in the left. So the more income inequality there is, the more people, again, the more unrest you have, and the more unrest you have, people are looking for like a strong man, like in the context of authoritarian coming into power and implementing fascism in the country. And obviously economic growth I mentioned. One other thing I forgot to mention was poverty. That's with regard to corruption. So from a data point of view, terrible. Everything, this is like the linchpin of all of society. If we don't fix income inequality just on the data, then everything will fall apart. What does the data actually say? So if you, let me explain, how can I explain this in a graph? So if you've heard of the Kuznets curve, basically it's like a bell. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse moving, but it's like a bell. And the idea is with the Kuznets curve is that as a country begins, as in less developed economically, the income inequality during that period of time could be bad, but the more it gets developed, income inequality has less of a significant effect. Or basically, when I said before that if you take all the countries together and you smush them together, then you get this result. But if you separate them to first world, second world, or third world countries, then you'll notice that the income inequality in developing countries is not so bad. In what sense is it not bad? In terms of economic growth, income inequality, even slightly higher income inequality, will increase economic growth. But otherwise, it's like a flat line. There's no difference between income inequality and economic growth very much. There's no connection between income inequality and poverty. If you follow the developing countries model, so if you reduce income inequality in a developed country, it won't necessarily affect poverty, and it has no effect on democracy. In general, there is no connection at all of income inequality to any economic phenomenon. There's just correlation. There's no strong correlation. There's no causal correlation. There is no economic theory even as to why these things happen. So in general, when we're talking about on the economic side, there is nothing there. There's nothing there to connect to. You can always say, oh, we have poverty and income inequality, but it's not a direct connection. So we're talking about essentially morality and politics. It's from an economic point of view, people are not equal, and that's the result of what happens. In terms of unrest, I would just say a few things. Again, with crime, the economists are the ones that are concerned with economic inequality, with the income inequality and crime. Criminologists are not. They're not very concerned with it. Criminologists, if they are concerned with why someone is a criminal, they look for personality. There's some kind of like a Jordan Peterson kind of like 5-trait personality thing. I'm not super familiar, but like something like that. They look for a variety of different things. Income inequality specifically won't be that. Like you can say that some places have like poor neighborhoods and stuff like that, and they have more crime, and it's a variety of different things. But criminologists will not look at it in the same way that economists will. So they don't exactly link up on this particular thing, but economists will just say, oh, here's the data, and for causal and for non-causal, for correlational reasons, you'll see that they're on the same kind of statistics, but there isn't like a super strong connection. Or there's either a no connection or a weak connection. In terms of revolution, there have been, and you can say this on my behalf, there's been far more revolutions on account of taxation than there have been of income inequality. The French Revolution started because the king wanted to tax the people more, because he was attacking other places and he needed to raise money. The American Revolution against the British was because, again, taxation. No taxation without representation. There's a variety of many different revolutions that started because of taxations, and even like more recent things like revolutions in Syria or revolutions in Iran that are ongoing. Those started because of the poor economic situation that the government put the people in. I can't really speak to fascism. I don't know if I can dispel the myth for these people about fascism, but obviously they are playing in the same ballpark. So if a socialist saying, the people are unhappy, therefore they should have socialism, there's like a 50-50 chance they'll have fascism or socialism because of the situation. So the socialist or the progressive is playing in the same ballpark as the fascist, though they're fighting over the same people. So I'm not exactly sure how you reply, but that what I just said could be one of those reply. Okay, so I addressed a lot of that. Essentially, I think with regards to the genealogy of how this sort of happened, there appears to be like a package deal where inequality and justice got put in the same package. And that's how people basically view it now. So if like people want social justice, people want justice in general, I guess, but it's now the word inequality and justice are in the same ballpark, same package. If you want to say like with regards to, let's say, class struggle, like if we have just the reason that we have inequality, why some people have more money than others, is because of exploitation, and by default like that is why we have inequality. It's either because of corruption. Actually, do this. It's either because of corruption, because the capitalists have access to the government, who then pass laws that benefit them and protect their property rights, and that's why they can exploit the people, the workers, sorry. But I'm not exactly necessarily doing this from like a socialist per se. I'm doing it more from like a normie, progressive, egalitarian point of view. So, so let's try to explain how we got here. So, and this I'm doing a bit of my own integrations here. So bear with me. In my opinion, there's a lot of truth to the reason why we got here, or why people care about inequality specifically, is because of what Ayn Rand calls selfishness without a self. And the way I see it, dependency. Yeah, good. So the idea that when Ayn Rand said selfishness without a self, the way I interpret it is that you want certain things. You want certain things from certain material things, certain things from other people in society, but you don't know how to get those things. You are fearful. You don't think you're capable of doing these things. So you feel that it's a good idea to subjugate yourself to a tribe, to a group, to appeal to the tribe and the group, and that tribe and group will take care of you. So, and the way that I saw it is that I saw this word moral dependency from a video by Jonathan Haidt, who was talking about, he has this thing where he talks about kids raised after 95, and they were raised with technology and helicopter parents that didn't let them go outside and play like in a sort of free range manner that he promotes. And he said that because when the kids were growing up, there was always a parent in the room, there was always a parent in the outside with them, they have a sort of moral dependency. Now, when he used the word moral dependency, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. The word itself seemed like it's not the right combination of words for what he's describing. But more or less, like, he basically said that they don't know how to solve problems in life because they haven't been allowed to fail or allowed to experience pain and overcome it, so that they're more dependent on like their parent, or assuming their parent is not an authority. And then as I was studying altruism, and I was reading Selfishness Without a Self, I saw Ayn, like in the text, use moral dependency. I'm like, and then immediately connected the two, because it was just too much of a coincidence. So if text regarding what Ayn Rand is saying and what Jonathan Haidt is saying, I mean, there must be some sort of connection. But so yeah, I hope I explained what this means. Moral efficacy, to some degree, means self-efficacy. So you're confident in your abilities. You know what to do. You know how to solve a particular problem. In the context of having moral efficacy, that you have like a moral framework, a moral set of principles to guide you through life, and you know what you're going for and how to work hard at it. You're confident in your abilities and in your principles that will lead you to where you want to go in life. So these things are polar opposites. And more people today have a sort of, are morally dependent. And that's why we're seeing like the rise of socialism and stuff like that. So the relationship between people, or actually no, hold on. And I've also made an integration that, actually wait, hold on. So I've explained moral dependency. So essentially, people who are morally dependent need some sort of group approval, because they're very dependent on the group. And nowadays, the way they signal to the group that they belong to the group, or they should be part of the group, is that they virtue signal. They're saying, I am of your tribe. I do these things to prove that I'm of your tribe. Please take care of me. And in addition to, or please include me in your group so I can be taken care of. In addition, they also have sort of like, they like authority, or they like a parental authority, but also they like the authority, the leader of the group. They like to be told what to do because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to live their life. So they have, I'm using generalized terms, but just to make it clearer. So they also have faith in authority, and this is not entirely dissimilar from religion to some degree. Like, you have faith in an authority to tell you how to live your life. You want to be a good person to stay part of the group. This is the similar construct. And but how is it more relevant nowadays with our inequality? Is that if someone is effective, more like either self-effective or morally effective, then it's a sort of threat to where people are. So they envy them. They envy them because they don't need the group necessarily, or they envy them because the group values them more than they values the people who are less effective. And basically, the people who are more dependent on the group ask the authority to use some sort of force to make these people less effective. Again, we have like I'm not sure if people are familiar with the tall poppy syndrome. This is kind of like what I'm going on about. But that's kind of like basically the cycle. Now, I've also identified what like accelerates the envy or accelerates the fear in people, and that is speed and scale. Or at least that's how I see it. A lot of the socialist stuff started just as the Industrial Revolution starts. So as things were accelerating in terms of industry and building stuff, socialism came around. More people want, if you have a situation where, let's take socialism proper. If you have a situation where a capitalist has access to capital, they may not have a lot of capital to begin with, or they may not be rich to begin with, and the workers equally may not be rich. But the idea of socialism is, or the idea of this exploitation model that socialism talks about, is that they'll gain more wealth over time. The speed of which they gain wealth is faster than that of a regular worker. So speed is a element here as well. Again, and even now, if you look at AI and stuff like that, people are afraid of it because it's moving too fast. People will lose their jobs too quickly. They won't be able to adapt fast enough. You have all the Luddites back when there were sewing machines in a similar vein, but with AI, this is different, and this will, moving too quickly. People are essentially afraid of speed and scale. It's changing too quickly. It's changing what I know of my culture, of my town, of my city. I don't like it. It's moving too fast. I need to tell the government to stop it, to slow it down. That's that. One other thing. Now, I'm not exactly sure. You guys can tell me what you think, but I'm not exactly sure if how this fits very well. But I do want to include it. So basically, when things go wrong, the people who are more dependent blame institutions. Now, like, so for example, they're blaming capitalism, they're blaming the government for not being as effective, or they're blaming let's say the left wing, they're blaming the right wing government. Now, I'm not exactly sure how both authority and institution, because technically it's the same, it's similar, how you can want authority, have faith in authority, and still blame institutions. But so it's not exactly integrated well in this particular point, and I'm willing to take suggestions. But I do notice that they are blaming institutions. They're not going after people directly. They're going after the institutions that allow these things to happen. or they want these things to change. And the last thing I just wanted to add here is what I call Chomsky's cage. I'll explain. So this is really the last bit here. So Chomsky's cage, basically Noam Chomsky had a interview in '96 where he says he isn't for slavery, he isn't for cage, people living in a cage, but he basically said, but in these circumstances, he is for people living in a cage in the following metaphorical sense. You are in a cage with other people, with your countrymen. Outside the cage are tigers, are capitalists in the form of tigers, in the metaphorical form of tigers. And if you leave the cage, the tigers will eat you up very quickly. So it's better to stay with your group together inside the cage because it's safer, and you need to stick together, right? You can't have a situation where people wander off and then, the tigers can come into the cage and ruin everything. So while you're in the cage, I mean, it's still a cage. So essentially the government is the cage. You can improve the cage. You can increase the flooring space. You can add pillows to the cage. But you are still in the cage. And it's important for everyone to stick together. Now the idea here is you're intentionally limiting your freedom to stay together in the group, and the government protecting you and the group against the evil capitalists who are trying to exploit you. So the idea here is voluntarily give up your freedom because this arrangement is better for you. Again, this is like the moral dependency group approval, Chomsky's cage. Or basically, and the way that you get people to stay in the cage together is you tell them, well, look, you're indebted to other people in your society. You didn't do everything yourself. You are, again, like the whole you didn't build it and you didn't build the roads, you didn't get educated from the teachers and all that kind of stuff. You're indebted to a group. You owe the group. You need to stay in the cage with us. What I'm going to talk about now is the opposite of what you've seen, where everything connects nicely to one another. Now it's just random and everywhere. So yeah, hold on. So basically, let's go over a few points. So one point, for example, like I can make the case that, look, money in itself, in the case of economic income inequality, money itself is not important. But what you do with that money, or the things that money can get you. So essentially what you're looking for is that everyone has access to stuff. Now, if you look at income inequality in terms of consumption, then it's amazing. The price of a refrigerator has gone down. Like if you take the average, blue collar hourly wage and say how many hours I need to work for, let's say, TV in 1979 versus today, it's like 400 hours versus, 10 or 4 or something like that. So in terms of consumption, the free market's doing a bang-up job. Everyone has access. A lot of people have access to stuff. What they have less access to stuff is stuff the government has touched. So healthcare, housing, education, higher education, student loans, stuff like that. Anything the government has touched has gone more expensive over time. Everything the free markets, to some degree, they're regulated more or less, but to some degree, like everything the market has more control over, less regulated, less subsidized, less influenced by the government, those things have gone down in price. So in terms of like in income inequality here, that is the money itself, you're moving money, it's not important. And in addition to that, when you're taking money away from productive people or productive this is the regular argument, you take that money and you give it to people who will consume it right away. So it's gone, essentially. Or how you can look at it, for another way of looking at it is that in general in society you have production and you have consumption. And the idea is that you have production a little bit more than consumption. So if in that case, your economy grows a little bit because you've produced a little bit more than what you've consumed. Or any savings essentially is the difference from the excess of what you produce to what you've consumed. So if you take money from people who are productive and give it to people who consume it, the money is essentially gone. But if you give it to, if you let them keep it and they invest more in production, then you grow production more, and then the cost of stuff goes down and people have more access to this stuff. Okay. Next point. So again, scattershot. I like this example in particular. I can make the claim that people don't really care about inequality enough to do anything about it. So if two people knock on your door, not at the same time, but two people knock on your door, one person says, "Hi, I'm collecting for a charity for your local homeless or something in the area. Can you please donate some money?" You might give some money. But if they knock on your door and said, "Hey, I'm collecting to solve income inequality," they'll be like, "I'm not sure what that is. That doesn't seem important to me." To some degree, like you can say, income inequality isn't important for a lot of people based on this like door knocker example. Or another example could be if someone down the street has a house twice as big as mine, and 3 cars while I have 2, how does that necessarily affect me? It doesn't. So that's like something I sometimes like to bring up. Again, though, a lot of people are just so confused that I'm even questioning income inequality. They just don't know how to handle it. So again, could be an advantage in a debate. To a big degree, the Fed in the US, and basically any central bank, is a major driving force in inequality. Now, again, we don't necessarily care about inequality, but if other people care about inequality, then essentially since 71 in the US, let's say, when gold was separated from the dollar, income inequality has risen more and more. Why? Because essentially, and I have a blog post about this. Essentially, when I'm gonna butcher this, but when the Fed creates money, they're basically creating money. The way they create money increases the price of assets, of bonds, or they buy bonds, they buy treasuries or something like that. But the idea is that it inflates the price of these assets. But assets could be like stock price or something, or it could be the price of houses. There's just the mechanism that's how they inject money. They create money into the economy. So basically, if you look at it, like the rich, the people who own houses or assets or bonds and stuff like that, they will get rich faster because they receive the money, this printed money first. It trickles down to them first. And that causes inequality. So it's something worth looking at, but Federal Reserve is a huge reason for inequality. The way I see it, you necessarily need progressive taxes just to offset what the Fed is doing. But yeah, there's people who have written books. It's not a secret. It's not unknown. Maybe to the people you're debating, but if you do Fed as I think there's a book, The Fed as an Engine of Inequality, or Fed and Inequality Together, you'll see it yourself. You come up. Another completely unrelated point. When you discuss these things, and this is like a generic thing, when you discuss it, when you say that income inequality is not important, you look like a heartless, mean person. Why do you look like a heartless, mean person? Because you're saying it's not important. You know, people, you know, they can just manage or something. And even the fact that you're not being super critical and concerned about these social issues that they consider issues, you are a mean and heartless person. So, and just because you're more optimistic about it, you're not concerned about it. And the same, I have the same problem in when I discuss climate change. If I'm not super concerned about it, then I must be a heartless, mean person. So be cautious, be aware of that. And what I would do is I would be concerned with or go on the attack against the divisiveness in society. So basically, we're talking about inequality, but in the context of inequality across economic classes or inequality across racial, not classes, but racial groups. So I would go on the attack and say that these divisions in societies are not helpful, because we shouldn't have a situation where we're attacking each other, or it's man versus man. We should have a situation where we're working together against nature. So, we need to create more food. We need to produce more food. We need to produce more medicine. We need to protect ourselves against tornadoes or droughts and stuff like that. We need to work together and not say we've solved all these problems. We have a lot of wealth. Now let's see how we distribute it. That's not the attitude we should be taking. Another completely different, unrelated point. This must be exhausting. If you, it's just like a point of observation. If you look at like regular welfare, or resolving income inequality, you basically take money from the rich and give it to the poor. So you take money from the top 2 quintiles and give it to the bottom 3 quintiles. I think nowadays, when we're less concerned with economic classes and more concerned with racial classes, I think we have like a similar effect. So there's an expectation that you need to take from the upper racial classes and take away something from them and give to the low, I'm saying quotations low, lower racial, don't kill me, lower racial classes, to equal it out in the same way that welfare and income and things to lower income inequality do. So you can't give the Ivy League place to a white cis male. You have to give it to the whatever, I don't know, black lesbian something at the bottom. You have to fix society, because right now it's in the same way that like the benefits of society is distributed unequally across different racial groups. In the same way you fix income inequality with welfare, you have to do the same thing with races as well. That's another observation I know. It just seems like it's similar, or it's using the same mentality to solve a problem. You take from someone and give to someone else. So to some degree, I mean, this is again the divisiveness in society, but the divisiveness happens around government. Government itself is a sort of dividing or divisive force. Certain groups, you can say interest groups, or certain racial groups, or economic groups, or outright special interest groups, go to the government and argue to get stuff, to get more stuff, more rights, or more rights for themselves but not others. And again, another observation, but the government, or maybe democracy, per se in its current form, or even utilitarianism more broadly, is what is causing these divisions, because the government takes a lot of stuff from everyone else, holds those resources there, and then it says, okay, let's fight or argue for who. I mean, it's not really fight violently, because obviously it's less violent in a sort of democratic process, but it's still a sort of conflict where who gets what, who should get more, who should get less. And then some people say, back to the point with the virtue, well, I need more and I should get more because of reasons. So part of the problem with dividing society into the richest and the poorest is that there is an assumption that people stay in their quintiles throughout all their life. This is not true. This is the opposite of true. Usually people, like, let's say teenagers, they start off poor. They work at poor jobs. They have low income. And over time, they increase their skill sets and attain more money, and they perhaps go to university or not go to university. They buy a house, they don't buy a house. They start a family, they don't start a family. Over time, they grow their skill sets to increase the amount of income they can attain, and they save more of it. They invest more of it. And so even a pension, by default, you invest. A house is an asset that increases over time, unless it but typically increases over time. If you have some savings and you put it in the stock market, I personally don't, but you can, and those will go, assuming you know what you're doing, or if you invested in something who and they know what they're doing, it will grow over time. So when you start off, you are by default poor, and when you towards retirement, you should have a lot of money. Typically, if you break society down into age groups, the elderly or the people who are retiring just before retiring or have retired have the most wealth in all of society. The elderly, in fact, are the richest, typically the richest group between all the other age groups. I know it doesn't seem that way, and you have all these Social Security and I think Medicare is for the elderly, if I got that wrong. But because it's set up this way because elderly are a very important voting bloc, but they're made to seem like they don't have any money and they need like support from the government. And to some degree, the way that Social Security is set up, they may do. Whether it was a privatized, it wouldn't be as big of an issue. But again, just going back to the point, sorry, is that over time you go up in quintiles, and just before you retire, you should be in the highest quintile at least for 1 year, or 20% of the population. Sorry, that's not true. 73% of the population will spend 1 year in the highest quintile, at least 1 year. So yeah, just look at that. I think like two last points. So one point is that I think that this sort of this mechanism, sorry, historically, socialism, and you could make the case for religion as well, but let's just take socialism for now. It seems to me more like a battle between intellectuals. So which intellectual can influence the greatest number of people with their ideas? But it's not the case that it's like, for example, Karl Marx was wealthy or came from a wealthy family, although he never worked. He was either wealthy at some point or Engels subsidized him. But these were people that were intellectual, born rich. A variety of other intellectuals that went to university contributed to either socialism or fascism. Or you could say like John Locke, who contributed to property rights, natural rights. It seems to me like the authority element in this graph that I've shown seems to be like a fight between different intellectuals over who controls the regular, in quotations, people. It's never the case that or at least historically, it's not the case that the regular people have like an intellectual and they themselves organize themselves to do something. No, it's like they listen to ideas from intellectuals, from philosophers. This is a point Ayn Rand made. And then whichever one takes hold, the most populist idea is what captures the most people, and then it becomes a movement. But it's just like an observation that I made, that it's like intellectuals fighting other intellectuals, who has the most populist ideas. And the last point, before I go on to answer the fence question, the baseball fence question, is that there is a book called The Great Levelers. And The Great Levelers is a book that discusses throughout history what were the biggest thing that reduced inequality. And typically it's 4 things, although I'm only going to remember 3. It's a state collapse, plague, revolution, or like some kind of like large earthquake or large like event. Basically, lots of people died. These are the key ways of how to reduce inequality. So in England was the bubonic plague in the 14th century. It caused a lot of the reduced inequality. Thomas Piketty's work says that it was the taxes in the 1950s, or the things from the Great Society after the Second World War. But he didn't do that. That he didn't calculate that super correctly. It was because of the Second World War, where a lot of people died, that caused a lot of inequality reductions. So technically, if people are interested in reducing inequality on a large scale, you're looking at these things: mass death. Okay? And read the book The Great Levels. It's quite nice. Okay, this is highly complicated. I don't even know why. You asked the question with offense, you may as well get the full answer. Okay. So, what are the things that reduce the efficiency of distribution and have negative effects from when you redistribute wealth or income? So starting on the right, we have Kuhn's leaky bucket theory. What is the leaky bucket theory? Basically, when you when you grab people's wealth and put it in a bucket, some of the wealth comes out and leaks out, and you don't, and the end person who's supposed to receive the money gets less. Why? Because you have inefficiencies, bureaucracies, people's salaries that needs to be paid, a whole lot of different things, and that is the leaky bucket theory. And that is the state, and money is lost at this point. Moving on. So let's say you have a rich person, middle class person, a poor person. These two are taxed, goes to the state, and transfers it to the poor person who has more money. But the rich person, so again, the rich person has less money, the middle class person has less money, the poor person has more money. So here we have, so the rich person who has now less money, they buy more regular goods and they buy less luxury goods. Yeah. They also work less and they also invest less. Why do they work less? Because there's a point where you're taxed at a very high rate, or that let's say take example from the UK. Let's say you have a £90,000 salary, which is high, and then you can get a £100,000 salary, but it will be more work, and you may not come home every day of the week to stay in the office, and you may need to travel. It's basically more responsibilities and more work, and you get £10,000 more a year. But if you remove taxes on, let's say you I don't fully remember, but let's say you get like I think it's either 500 or 600 pounds more a month. So as a result, after taxes, let's say you get let's say you get 480 pounds a month more as a result of this increase. But whenever you have to stay in the office, you buy, you go to a restaurant, you pay for your own money. Sometimes you need to, I'm not sure, you need to spend money on someone helping around the house because you're not there and your wife needs help, for example. So you need to basically increase these costs, and it causes strain on your marriage. So you need to pay for a psychiatrist to help you in your marriage. Now, basically what I'm saying is, even though you get a certain amount of money, you have much more responsibility. It's not worth the extra headache, so you work less as a result. That was a bit of a long example, but you get the idea. Now, buy less luxury goods is important because I'll explain it rather quickly, but basically the idea of luxury goods is super relevant to capitalism, and it's not written here, but I can say it in this way. What is the connection between a billionaire releasing a $600 phone and then 10 or 15 years later, every poor person in the world, or like really the vast majority of people in the world, have a small phone in their hand, no matter if even if it's a third world country, where they can call people, look up Wikipedia articles, and even transfer money between phones. What's the connection between those two? But basically, Steve Jobs released a smartphone, released the iPhone, which is a smartphone, and it started off as a luxury good, but because they invested in making this phone and all the technologies that went into it, over time those things became cheaper and more accessible by more and more people, and then it just kind of spread across the world. Now, if you intended, even if you intended to, and there were projects like this back in the day, I remember. Let's say you had like a UN project or a World Economic Forum project that everyone in poor countries have access to a computer. We're talking about either kids having access to a computer for their schoolwork, or Google or Facebook, I remember, had like people working to get more people across the world onto the internet, so they'll increase their market share. So it was a charity project, but it's in their benefit that more and more people come online. Even in the wildest dreams, both the charity or the government or Google or Facebook could not get people online as effectively as just the regular market with market incentives. But it has to start with someone buying a luxury good, and this can also work with medicine. So if a rich person in Switzerland pays for like an expensive procedure, flies in from abroad, pays for an expensive procedure that is very effective, over time that expensive procedure will become cheaper and cheaper, and more people will have access to it, and that's basically the way of progress. The fact that here in this graph people buy less luxury goods and buy more regular goods, that has a negative effect on this sort of process. Specifically, it's called Baumol's cost disease reversal. Look that up. Never mind. But also people invest less. So we were talking about you take the money away from the rich people, so they don't invest it in productive activities. They don't invest it in factories and in new companies, stuff like that. So investments shrink. Investment is key to economic development. Absolutely key. Economic dynamism, economic development, economic growth, essential. You don't have that, or you have less of it. Middle class, let me just again, buy more regular goods, buy less luxury goods, work less, save less. So here the rich invest, here they save less. Now again, the work less from both these two means you have less economic output. People take the 90K job instead of the 100K job. There's less, again, economic growth shrinks. But even in the poor person, so they buy more regular goods, but they buy less cheaper goods. So there's less incentive to make like value goods, because people, even the poor people, have some money, so there's no reason to reduce the prices or let's say innovate these products so they're cheaper, because people will buy them either way. And that has again, increases the price of certain things. And also, even the poor person works less. Why? Because they're given money. They don't need to work as hard. The ready game. So overall, these three categories work less economic output. We don't have the investments, less economic growth. We don't have the luxury goods to start the process of getting cheaper over time. And basically, this is called the Slutsky's substitution theory. That is why when you redistribute wealth, you're cutting everyone off. You're cutting everyone off in some respect, and you're shrinking the overall economy. I know this is a bit long. I apologize. I can give this handout out later, but this is like several reasons why income or wealth distribution shrinks. It hurts everyone, basically.